Was an earlier version of the morning bun, which I had already decided because I was getting a lot of things where people were coming in to my second shop and they were kind of pastry shaming. I call it pastry shaming, where somebody's like, well, gosh, it's so big, or oh, I shouldn't. And so I decided, as most of you, with having your pastries, they were smaller than the historic morning buns used to be. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the changes and why I made them. So, oops, we're just going to zip through some of these starting photos of me very excited. Okay, so this was a slightly later iteration where we're working on doing the sugar coating. When I had my bakery up in Eau Claire, I was doing it a little bit closer to the way that Odessa had showed me when I was in my 20s when I worked for her. So I'm just going to go ahead and read what she said. So she's got a couple of thoughts. She said, the morning bun came about in a unique set of circumstances. It makes for a story which I should publish someday to set the record straight. Meanwhile, thanks for asking. Here are some highlights. We rolled the dough the day before and spread it generously with brown sugar and cinnamon. I do it that way, so it's a croissant dough recipe. And then you roll it up like jelly-style roll. And then you portion it into a very well-basted muffin cup to keep the dough from sticking. The trays then went into the cooler overnight, where the brown sugar and bastings dropped into a thick slurry at the bottom of the muffin tin. So the style that I was making here at my second shop, were much more of that style. However, that filling murdered the pans. And so you don't want to have metal flakes in your pastry. Oh, no. That is just really unappealing. So I was doing it that way, but we were trashing pans kind of left and right. So she was always trying to figure out how to save steps at 4 a.m. So she learned she could get away with putting the trays of muffin tins directly from the cooler to the oven as it preheated. The buns rose quickly as the decks came up to temp, so that's sort of baker talk. Decks meaning, the layer, the shelves inside the oven. The inner folds expanding as most of the oven's heat penetrated to the center, thus creating the signature exploding spiral top. Meanwhile, the copious slurry cooked into a glaze, which coated the sides when tipped out of the trays. So it was more like a caramelized finish. And then she says, this is where it gets interesting. Back in the day, the local airline crews would gather outside the baker's room door, which was the floor that was above the Ovens of Brittany, the one on State Street. So they'd be waiting for the first pastries to come out of the oven before they opened, and time was down to the minute, but the glaze was lethally hot. And so that was one of the issues that I run into occasionally is somebody wants something and I'm like, don't touch it. I'm selling it to you, but I'm selling it to you with a warning. Please do not bite into this. This will take the roof of your mouth off and it'll be worse than pizza. So please just restrain yourself. So what she did is she said she filled a wide bowl with granulated sugar with cinnamon mixed into it. And then she dumped those molten buns directly in and tossed them with handfuls of sugar. So that helped create almost like a little layer that prevented people from scorching their mouth. And then she said that the planes still took off on time. So the morning bun should always be called the morning bun. The name is perfect, and it came from the Ovens of Brittany founder, Joanna Guthrie. So that was a very influential person back in the day that set the philosophical standards for Ovens of Brittany and then beyond, about this higher standard of excellence and product and sort of spiritual way we interact with each other on more of a spiritual plane. So it's very beautiful stuff. Anyway, so she called it that after she saw what Odessa's team and herself had come up with. So for Les Toiles, she came up with a flat, crispy version, which she called the Spice Girls. And so the name came from the 5 spices. Now there was no cinnamon, so it was allspice, coriander, vanilla, nutmeg, and clove or cardamom. And she said that they did dance while they worked to the Spice Girls singing what I really want at full volume. So, and then she said, I hope you get this in time, which I got it this morning. And then she said, bless you for keeping the ground vanilla bean in the sugar. So what I did, she also wants to credit a couple of people just for the sake of record, she said Nancy Christie was on her team at the creation of the Morning Bun, and also Christy Timon, who went on to found a famous bakery, the Clear Flower Bakery, which is, I think, out on the East Coast. And then she mentions Pamela Asquith, who went on to write several books, including a book on croissant. So I just wanted to mention those names as part of the founders of the Morning Bun. So when I worked for Odessa, I was in my 20s. I had just kind of landed on, culinary as my path forward. I'd done a couple of different programs at college. None of them stuck the way that culinary school stuck. And so I worked for Odessa over a course of a summer. I got to, learn how to do croissant by the tub, lamination, and also making croissant dough by hand in a tub, and then doing the butter packs, and then doing lamination, and et cetera. So I would come in and I would bake, and then I'd help out the main baker, and then I'd run those flights of stairs up and down the stairs, which I did when I was in my 20s. I couldn't do that now. And then I'd set up the cafe downstairs and get that going. So, and when I left at the end of the summer to go to culinary school here at Madison College, and I started to really firm up on the idea that I really would like to do a bakery myself, and I would really like to do it the style in which she did it, which was from scratch, using the best available products, having some ability to do some on-the-fly improvisation. Teresa and I were talking before this event, and we were talking about how she could just put together little scraps of dough, and she made some really amazing stuff. She made this one that was like little, it almost looked like a little croissant flour, and it was filled with some kind of impossibly delicious fruit, and then had like a little swirl of like some kind of crème patisserie on the top, and then sprinkled with some kind of, it was beautiful. They were just beautiful. And so, of course, they got sold, and then for the next 2 months, people were asking for them. But she just made it based on, the philosophy, we don't want to waste any of this dough. This dough took us as expensive, and it took us a long time to make, and we're just going to make something really special. And it was just like this, piece of magic that just evaporated, and then it was gone, and it only lived on in people's memories. So, but I really connected with her kitchen because my mom was working on her PhD in medieval French studies. Working at Odessa, I really saw the connection with, a lot of, she's pulling from historical resources and Victorian resources, so it was the first place outside of my mom's house where I could see, using flowers in food and doing all the stuff. And so for me, it really was like a soul connection. And so, I thought, how can I make this happen? So I moved away. I moved up to Eau Claire, Wisconsin after my culinary degree, and it was a very far cry from, this beautiful little food sanctuary that we have here in Madison. And it was all about, hydrogenated fats and long lists of chemicals, and it was very depressing. And it was also, I was like, well, gosh, no wonder people have health issues eating this stuff day in and day out. You can't do this. This is not what bakery is supposed to be. So I ended up opening my first place up in Eau Claire, which was called the French Confection. This was on Water Street in Eau Claire. It was short-lived, brilliant little thing. It failed for a variety of reasons, which I won't go into, because that would be a whole other speech. But this is what my storefront looked like. I got this vintage bakery case. You can see the glossy morning buns on the far left with the glaze still on them. So that was me back in the day. Gas prices were going up, so I had somebody build me a bakery bicycle, and this actually had a bakery rack in the back, which was cut in half and welded together, and we attached it to an adult tricycle. And I really love this emerald flake green, so I had the whole thing painted. And it had 2 brakes, and we only had two car accidents with it. We were both parked cars. Staff was okay, just injured pride. So she's an attorney now, by the way. She was 15 in that picture. So yeah, we had our first place, our second place, and then I had a chance to bring it back to life at Feed Kitchen, which is an incredible community resource. We might need more food kitchens. I think that one's at capacity. That's what allowed me to get up and started again, all these years later. I did want to find So yeah, just, getting started. This is just my Facebook page. All things as we're, got a wholesale account, a couple of co-ops that I sell my products frozen to. So we sell, I actually I decided to rebrand the morning buns for my own purposes because I feel like my formula is fairly close to the original and I don't want to get in trouble. So I decided, sort of in honor of Odessa, that I would call it a spiced sugar bun. So it's pretty much taking her original formula, which was just cinnamon and sugar, and combining it with the spice bun, the Spice Girl bun, and putting those things together. So if you notice, the external coating has more than just cinnamon. So I used to do coriander because I love the citrusy quality of coriander, right up until I had my first customer who had a cilantro reaction, like so, because coriander is a member of the cilantro family. And the first time I had somebody bite into it and say, oh, I didn't like that reaction at all. So I'm like, there's more people out there that wouldn't feel like they're eating pastry. They're not expecting, a member of the cilantro family and their dusting of sugar. So I decided to omit the coriander because it was like, well, that's just not going to work. So, but I do have the nutmeg allspice. We do use a vanilla powder or ground vanilla beans, depending on our budget, which kind of amount to the same. This was my apprentice from my first place who came down. This is our day one at Northside Farmers Market. So she flew out from Boston to come in. That was a kiddo going like this. So in this photo, she's in her late 20s. And yeah, we just got started again. And here's all the many hours, long lines at the Northside Farmers Market. Here's us at Feed Kitchen. Here's happy customers. This is just the life. So let's see. Found a really good picture of the spiced sugar buns. This is me playing like Odessa taught me to. So my best friend has a vintage Cortland apple tree that's, 20, 30 years old, and every other year it produces so much fruit that the tree starts to break. So every 2 years she puts out a call and says, please help us with our apple tree. And so now it's a pilgrimage where I grab every large Tupperware bin I have, I drive up to Eau Claire, I help strip the tree, and then we bake them inside. We hollow out the core, stuff it with, the spiced sugar bun mix and streusel, and just bake these little apples with the skin on right to our layered croissant dough, our scratch croissant dough, and so it's a fall favorite. Yeah, so again, it's just taking so here's a pan of an earlier imperfect, these are a little more perfect. So spiced sugar buns. So I adhere to the brown sugar and the cinnamon on the inside, and then the spice coating on the outside. So I can't really speak for what other people do. For us, the spiced sugar buns are one of our top 4 pastries that we offer. And so I had gone ahead and applied for the Dane County Farmers Market, thinking it was going to be a 5 to 10 year waiting list. We were going to use feed, but we were kind of straining at the seams with the amount of product that we had to keep there and the other bakers and competing for space. So it was just getting really tight. And then at the end of 2021, I found out that we were dropping on the waiting list to the point where the following year we were going to be allowed to go to start Dane County Farmers Market. So I'm like, well, that's my signal. We're going to need to get our own storefront. And so, I know that the loss, a lot of older vendors dropping out of Dane County Farmers Market was sad, but it allowed me to then justify getting a storefront and moving from Feed Kitchen, the limited space in Feed Kitchen, forward into getting our own place. And I'm just going to fast forward here back into some more photos. The day after Thanksgiving, 2 days after Thanksgiving, 2021, we moved into the old New Orleans takeout, and we just had the storefront and a bathroom that had a hand washing sink, and everything else was up for improvement. So this is us in our first first moments in the shop, I found another vintage bakery case, only this one had an extra layer in it. So I was like, okay, this is the bigger case that we need for our bigger enterprise. In the 10-year window, I went and got an undergraduate at UW Stout in business management and learned more about how to make everything balance in terms of the books. So just some lessons, and here's us in this is now our working pastry kitchen. It was bare bones when we first moved in. Those are our ovens outside. And then here's Karina, who's 15 in this picture. She just turned 17, and she just gave her notice. She's going on to college, and she has to do an internship. So I'm really sad about that, because she's been one of my core people. But yeah, here's us with our, we really do rely on the croissant dough. I didn't want to use Odessa's because it had personal, professional pride. And so I decided that I was going to look for one, and I found Julia Child's croissant recipe from Mastering, and it was close enough. And I made 3 changes to it so that it's mine. And so that's what I've been using ever since. And yeah, so I think probably a lot of you are familiar with our little storefront here. This is just us in our early days. Again, this is me messing around with, I think this is brioche dough with Nutella and hazelnuts and ganache, because why not, right? So that's more of a winter thing that we do. So yeah, this is our puppy. So I put this, even though at this point our Puy d'Amande that we make exceeds our sales for spiced sugar buns. Spiced sugar buns are pretty high up on the list. I consider them part of the top 4, and so that's what we bring to market. We bring spiced sugar buns, my morning bun, we bring the Puy d'Amande, we bring pâte au chocolat, we bring all butter croissant, and then we also bring little individual quiches, and the flavor changes monthly or seasonally or what have you. We're doing caramelized onion, we're going to start doing broccoli cheddar, and then we bring a scone. And so it was rhubarb. I think we're going to switch out to blueberry going forward, and that way, we limit what we bring just so that we can bring a lot of it and not run out. And so that's really the name of the game, is bring lots and lots and lots, because that crowd is insatiable. I forget that kind of like Therese was talking about. There's 2 different crowds. In the morning, you get just a real regular. You're going to see them every week. They know what they want. They've already got their shopping list, for your stall ahead of time. And then there's a lull, and then it's just a ridiculous amount of people, and it'll never be the same people twice. And that's really more the tourist group. So that's what I've got today. And yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions. Go ahead.
Thank you for the treat.
You're welcome for the treats. No problem.
Was this the spiced sugar bun or the morning bun?
This is the spiced sugar bun, which is the evolution of the morning bun that I was taught. So it's morning bun at its heart, but with a different finish, so that it's mine with a new name. That's amalgamation of the 2 things Odessa showed me when I worked for her. Mm-hmm.
So I bought buttery, caramelized.
Yeah, that's not this. That is the Puy d'Amande, which is our bestseller, and so that I evolved that over. So Puy d'Amande is one of those words that's French Gaelic, and it translates to butter cake, and it's a laminated dough, but it's different. It's handled differently than croissant, and that's our bestseller at this point over the last 3 years. I'd say this is our bestseller. So, yeah, but people love that one.
I've heard morning buns described as Puy d'Amande on steroids. Was Puy d'Amande, I assume it was the direct inspiration for
I don't know if that's what Odessa's original inspiration was. I think it may have been more organic. My impression is that it was more organic than that. Don't quote me on this. But my understanding was that she needed to use up some leftover, just regular croissant dough. Yeah. And that's how the morning bun was born, was just kind of, slathering it up and chucking it into a tray. And, she was really good at that, and stuff she made was brilliant. So I think that's how it was born. But
the improv dishes are the best, man.
Yes.
Buffalo wings.
Right. Yeah, you only get to do an impromptu once, and then once it's a hit, it's like, well, I guess we're going to have to remember how we did that week after week after week after week. So, another question? No? Okay, go ahead.
So, do you make morning buns too, or just the spiced sugar?
I make just the spiked sugar buns because, Therese confirmed for me the morning buns are kind of product protected. I know that other places make morning buns, but I feel like my croissant recipe is close enough to the original that I don't want to get in trouble with the old owners of Brittany, and so that's why I rebranded it as, and then given it a little tweak to kind of bring it into the new era.
And how do you spell the butter cake?
Queen, Kougn. Yeah, thank you. And then Aman is Amann.
And I've sometimes seen a hyphen in between.
Yes, yes.
Is it cinnamon based also?
No, it's just straight dough that as it bakes, it oozes a sticky syrup that becomes this kind of a caramelized finish. So it's its own thing. And often people will be like, is there some lemon in here or some, they tasting something else, but no, I do use salted butter. I'm pretty hardcore on salted butter, which I think that salt adds another dimension to it. It's considered a necessity in France. If you're making Kougn, it has to have salted butter, and also the butter that's produced here. If you're using unsalted butter, it has to have a preservative in it, and they use something called vitamin A palmitate. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, and it's a fish derivative. And so for us, when we're baking tons and tons and tons of croissants, and we're pulling them off the trays, and the trays are all greasy, I'm like, what's that smell? And I realized that it's the palmitate derivative, which has this fishy, gross quality. And I'm like, that's it. We're moving to salted butter. And so I modified all my recipes to account for that extra salt in the croissant. But that's part of why the Kougn tastes so good, is it's not just sugar, it's a little salt so that you can taste the dough and the fermentation and all the ingredients a little bit better. Therese, you had a question? Okay. So I'm a big fan of salted butter for that reason, because I feel like less preservatives the better, as I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but that's why I went to all salted butter. So. Okay, back there.
Don't know if you're comfortable sharing what brand of butter you use.
We buy a commercial brand called Silver Springs, which is funny because actually I just connected in my head, that's where Odessa lives. But it's a brand called Silver Spring butter that's available commercially. We use Performance Food Group that delivers us the butter. I was using Old World Creamery, which is like if for some reason we miss a shipment, I will go to Woodman's and I will get the Old World Creamery. Old World Creamery has a higher water content though, so that makes it a little harder for the bakers to manage. Silver Spring is much drier, much harder butter, less water. We do get a better product out of it. So, anybody else right there?
What are some upcoming things that you're looking forward to or excited about as you continue to grow your bakery?
Oh my gosh. So I'm in the middle of talking with Willie Street Co-op about providing them with our baked goods. We're actually going to provide Kougn
That would be
because,
so good.
as been mentioned, morning buns are fairly ubiquitous. Even though mine are a little bit different and I feel like they're special and they're best, I'm obviously biased. But Kougn is not something that is readily available because normally the traditional ones in France are big. They're like dinner sized. But I had to charge a ton because it's so much butter in that, and so it's not really cost effective. And I noticed that American consumers tend to shy away from big servings like that. It's harder to commit. So we do the bun size ones are called Kougnettes, even though we do call them Kougn. So we're probably going to launch that in July. I'm just meeting with both of the particular managers that handle both fresh bakery and frozen goods. So we're talking about doing bread there, but I haven't really run it past my staff yet, and I've got some rearranging of personnel to do before we can handle it. But that's coming up in July. Obviously, we're doing Wednesday market, Saturday market, and Sunday market here. So I've been out since forever working with, but I have a great staff. We are also working on trying to make our building fit some sit-down coffee shop area. So I run into zoning issues and landlord issues and the whole rigmarole. But I think we've kind of crossed several hurdles, and so I'm looking forward to that. I did get some grant money from the city of Madison to work on our shop and probably use those funds to upgrade our electricity so that we can take on a little bit more and make our space more efficient. So that's a stay tuned kind of announcement. I had wanted to be able to launch something October, but it might be January. Yeah, you'll see. So just drive past and look at the front, and you'll be like, "Wow, look at her go!" Or come in and get some things. So, all right, back here.
Avez-vous le choix que c'est le Far Breton?
Je parle un petit peu de français. Après beaucoup de pratique, je ne parle pas brésil. I know a couple of words, and they're all naughty. Say again?
Are you able to try to sell the actual Far Breton, the dessert?
Yes, we actually make it. We do make it in the shop. The Far Breton is an actual pastry. It's like a stiff flan, and I do the far au pruneau. So it's got the soaked prunes in it. I don't do liqueur just because of kids or someone with an allergy. So we usually do like a strong black tea to soak the prunes. And I think we have it in the shop. So yeah, stop by, you can order it, no problem. And that one is one of the ones like quiche. We'll do a full size if somebody wants to order a family style, and I'll also do far pruneau as a full size option that's available on our website if you want to order it. So come talk to me afterwards. All right, anyone else?
I'm just curious if you happen to know, I'm not expecting you to, how the morning bun made its way to the West Coast. Because I found in my research, there's an article from a San Francisco baker that was talking about how he was giving some apocryphal story about origin story about it being invented in the Bay Area, and then they said, oh yeah, and but also Madison makes a claim to it. Yeah, that's funny. But I'm curious if you knew how it actually, because it's that's one of the other places where you can actually find it in the United States.
Well, I think historically, I think it's Odessa's. It belongs to Odessa. That's her claim to fame. I think it's because of the airline stewards and stewardesses that were traveling. I think there was some connection to the jet room at the airport.
Right.
I don't know if they were selling. If Ovens of Brittany was selling some pastries at the jet room, that's my understanding. But I think what happened is that those people flying across the country then may have, shared it there, and then they figured out how to develop it there separately. But I think the crown belongs to Odessa personally.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
That's what makes for good food history. You get the competing stories.
Yeah. No, I think the airline and the people that were flying the airlines and bringing these fresh baked goods onto the airline is part of what developed that whole cult following of like, oh my gosh, the morning bun. Go ahead.
Well, I worked airport security back in the day.
You did? That's fabulous. She worked airport security back in the day.
And every morning the crews are coming through with the morning bun.
Oh wow, that must have been torturous in a small airplane.
Except that I lived very close to the one on Fordham Avenue, so I got my own morning buns. But I think that's probably how it got to the other parts of the world.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case.
And the Frontier people, the Frontier Airlines, when it was flying out of Madison and Milwaukee, those people were animals as far as the morning buns were concerned. They came through with boxes.
That's wonderful. When I was looking for a location for my shop after my initial spot fell through, I did go and look to see if the old Ovens of Brittany on the corner of Johnson and Fordham, if that was available, but it's been taken.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, can you repeat the joke?
Oh, sure. She was saying that the Frontier airline people were animals because of the love for the morning buns, and she thinks that that's also the case because she worked airline security back in the day. How wonderful!
Yeah.
So, because some of this is like, I'm pretty open to saying, well, I think I'm speculating here, but it's nice to have my speculation validated that that's exactly it. So.
But they never offered bribes.
They never offered bribes?
No,
You
they
couldn't
just coveted
pry it free from their
kept them
hands?
to themselves.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did they bring your gifts?
No,
No, she said they would not already.
they would not.
They kept it all to themselves.
All right, any other questions? Okay.
Well, thank you everybody for coming.